Before I begin today, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that I'm streaming from today. For us at Fostering Connections, that is the Woiwurrung and Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nations. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, as well as anybody joining us today who is a First Nations person. We also would like to acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded, and this always was, always will be Aboriginal land. So welcome, we've got a few people jumping on now. This is our monthly foster care one-on-one live stream. For those of you who haven't joined us before, this is a fairly open Q&A session, so please feel free to put any questions that you might have in the chat. But otherwise, I'm going to cover off some of the basics of foster caring as it relates to, of course, the Victorian context. So if you are joining us from other areas of Australia, some of the information that I give today might not be strictly relevant to your state, but it definitely is a good launching off point. So Fostering Connections is the statewide foster care recruitment service, and we call on the community to open their hearts and homes for children and young people in need. So by considering or becoming a foster carer. We know that it takes a village to raise children, so we're going to talk a little bit about what that means in terms of the village around children and young people in foster care and what it takes to become a part of that village. So if you're ready to play a part in becoming a foster carer or finding out more information, you can always give us a call on the number, whoopsie daisies behind us, which is 1800 013 088. We also have a lot of information on our resources and on our website, and we'll put that up into the comments as well. So if you'd like to visit our website just to read up a bit more about foster caring, you can always do that too. We've got some great case studies in there from current foster carers about their experiences as they relate to their different personal circumstances. I'd also like to acknowledge that we are in Pride Month this month, so we welcome members of the LGBTIQ+ community to put their hands up and play a part in becoming a foster carer and helping to look out for our vulnerable children and young people. If you are a member of a same-sex couple, or if you're a family with same-sex parents, you are absolutely eligible to become a foster carer. So the main eligibility criteria to get started is that you're over 21 years of age, you've got a spare bedroom in your home, and you're a permanent resident or Australian citizen. Although with that last one, it is possible to become an emergency foster carer as well if you aren't a permanent resident, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So as I said, we are the statewide foster care recruitment service. So if you do give us a call on the number behind me, which is 1800 013 088, or if you visit our website, our role is to talk to you about becoming a foster carer, provide information that you might need as it relates to your personal circumstances and your family. We can answer any questions that you might have and help alleviate any concerns at this stage. And then our role is to put you in touch with a foster care agency in your area. So you might be familiar with some of the agencies local to you. We often see their billboards and things around, but we can have a chat to you about which agencies specifically cover your area. We provide information and support as well as education. So as I said, if you've got questions relating to your personal circumstances, it's my job when you call up that inquiry line to answer those questions and to provide you with the information that you need to make that first step. So you're certainly not alone if this is the first time you've thought about foster caring, or if you're not quite sure what's involved. That's what we're here for, to help you out. Whether you're at the start of that journey and have lots and lots of questions, or if you're not quite even sure what you don't know yet, that is perfectly fine. So let's start with a little bit of background. What is foster care and how does it fit into the Australian context? So foster care is the temporary care of children and young people by members of the community, and those members of the community are all trained and accredited to be foster carers. So I'll talk a little bit more about that training and accreditation in a moment. Foster care is about looking after and supporting vulnerable children and young people between the age of 0 and 18 who are unable to live at home or with other family members. So the first point of contact is always to keep, the first point of call is to always keep children and young people in the family where it's safe to do so, and then within members of their within their extended community as well. So when that's not possible, then the final option is foster care. So that's where our foster carers step in. In most cases, when a child enters foster care for the first time, the aim is to support parents to have their children or young people return to their care as soon as it's safely possible to do so. And foster carers do play a key role in supporting that family contact and in helping children and young people to stay connected to their families of origin, whether that is that they've just entered care and their families might be doing some work to have them return to their care, or in the longer term, if it's not safe for them to return home, then our foster carers are still required to help support that connection to family and culture, which is really important. Every month there's about, at any given time, there's about 10,000 children in Victoria that are requiring foster care or home-based care or out-of-home care, depending on your definitions, which does include that kinship care, which I mentioned earlier, where children might stay with extended family members or members of their community. There are about 1,500 Victorian children and young people in foster care specifically, and that might be for a few days, it might be for a weekend, or it can be longer. So it can be up to a couple of months or up to a couple of years. When we talk about the different types of foster care that there are, if you are considering becoming a foster carer but you're not able to commit to years of time, that is okay. So broadly speaking, there's 4 different types of foster care that you can inquire about and become registered for. So those are respite care, emergency care, short-term care and long-term care. And what that looks like is usually emergency care is that emergency sort of situation where children or young people need somewhere to stay immediately. So usually it's that day or the next day, and you can sign up for up to 3 weeks of emergency care. Sometimes our carers might say they're available for a weekend or a couple of nights, and while that child or young person, while we're looking for different options for a longer term placement, then that emergency care is where that sort of starts out. Then there's that short-term and longer-term care. This is what people usually think of when they think of foster caring, is taking on a child or young person. They come and live with you, they become part of your family, and they will go to school or have other social activities and things like that, and you're responsible for that day-to-day care for that longer term. So that might still be the case, that parents or family members are doing extra work behind the scenes to help their children be returned to their care. And what that looks like in each situation will differ as well. Finally, there's that respite care that I mentioned. So usually respite care is sort of giving the long-term or short-term carers a bit of a break. So you might sign up for respite care and have an ongoing arrangement where the same child might come and stay with you 1 weekend a month as a bit of a break. So somewhat similar to a traditional auntie or uncle relationship where children will go and stay with aunties, uncles, grandparents or things for a weekend and give their parents a chance to recharge. It's the same situation for respite care. So it gives the foster carers a bit of a break. It gives the children and young people an opportunity to also have a bit of a break and go off and spend time with a different family for the weekend or sometimes for school holidays. So when you call up and make that first step into playing your part as a foster carer in Victoria, they'll talk to you your agency will talk to you about the different types of care that you can sign up for. And as they get to know you better across that accreditation process, they'll start chatting to you about what type of care might fit best within your family environment. So they'll consider things like if you've got your own children living in the home, if you work full-time, and other factors that might impact on how much capacity you have. You can also sign up for the ages of children that you'd like to care for. So as I said, foster care is the temporary care of children from 0 to 18, but you can sign up for any sort of range of ages within that full extent of that age range. So some people will say, we can do primary school age, that fits in well with the ages of our children, or we prefer adolescents, or we prefer babies, and you can be as specific as you like within that as well. So that can be reassuring for some people who might have had their own caring experience or parenting experience. You tend to be more familiar with the ages of your own children that you've already been through, and so that can help as well. And you can always change that age range over time. Another thing is we always try to keep children with their siblings wherever possible, but often that cannot be possible. But wherever it is possible for a child to stay with their siblings, then they will endeavour to do that in foster caring as well. So you can specify the number of children that you're able to care for at any one time. So for some families, that might be a baby and a sibling because they've got a cot and a single bed. For other families, they might have more spare rooms. So for example, if your own children have left the nest and you've got a couple of spare bedrooms, then you might be able to keep sibling groups together. But I guess the main point there is that it is different for every family, and as part of the accreditation process, your agency will get to know you really well to know what sorts of placements are going to suit you the best and the types of children that will be most appropriately cared for in your home. We always try to match foster carers with the children and young people that are the best match for your family and circumstances and lifestyle. So for example, if you're quite an active family and we've got a child or young person who needs a lot of quiet time or downtime, then that's a part of that matching process as well. That might not be the best fit, but wherever possible, they will try to do that matching really well based on your skills and experience, but also your lifestyle, your family, and other things that might be going on in your household as well. Excuse me. As I mentioned before, anyone can become a foster carer as long as they're over 21, have a spare bedroom, and are an Australian resident or permanent citizen. An Australian citizen or permanent resident. So if you're single, partnered, if you live in a share house, if you work full-time or you don't work at all, as long as you have that spare bedroom and you have that desire to want to help change a child or young person's life, you've got what it takes to be a foster carer. So that's definitely the start of that conversation, and over time your agency will work with you through the accreditation process to touch on the other, qualities and expectations of foster carers. So what that looks like is you'll start your journey by either giving us a call on the number behind me, so 1-800-013-088, or visiting our website. We can answer any initial questions that you might have and help you get started. And then the first step in commencing that accreditation process is, of course, putting you in touch with a foster care agency in your area. Once you do that, they'll start with some initial conversations, so that might be more of an informal phone call to start. They'll do some screening questions and ask you what you know about foster care and how much you need to learn, and they'll get started on that process. Then you'll do an information session. That information session is at some agencies completed in a group, and in some agencies that's done as a one-on-one session in your home. It just depends on the agency. And in that session, they'll talk to you more about the different types of care that I've already touched on today, some of the requirements of foster caring, and what it will look like day to day in your home as well. So it's really about giving you more information so that you can make an informed decision about whether foster care is right for you. After that stage, then you'll do some training, and that training is the same for every Victorian foster carer accredited here in the States. So if you do want to become a foster carer, no matter which agency you go to, you'll complete the same training as everybody else. Now that training is called Shared Lives, and it's specific for foster carers. So it looks at things like, when a placement starts and some of the reasons that children might come into care in the first instance, but also ways that you can help welcome that child into your home and make the environment as safe and secure as possible. They'll talk to you about some of the common challenges in foster care, so that might include things like emotional or behavioural challenges, or dealing with the impacts of trauma that children might have experienced, and also things that you might need to report back to your agency if a child discloses things to you, or if there's any concerning information that you hear during a foster care placement. They will also talk to you about the impacts on your family and your day-to-day activities in terms of time and things like that, to help make sure you really understand the commitment that you're signing up for. But they'll also talk to you about different supports that are available. So as I mentioned, you can be a foster carer if you work full time, if you don't work at all, if you've got children in your home, or if you're a single person. So they'll talk to you about some of those supports, and they are different at each agency, but really important to note that every single foster carer in Victoria has access to 24-hour on-call support. You'll have a case manager for every child in your care, and agencies also run a lot of activities in terms of support and training, different ways for you to meet foster carers, so social activities, and other ways for your children, for example, to meet other children whose families are foster carers, but also social activities and events for the children and young people in care, so they can connect with children and young people with similar experiences as well. After you complete that training as part of your assessment process, then you'll complete some paperwork. So of course there are things like a police check and a working with children check. There's also a home and environment check component to that. Every foster carer is asked to write a life story so that we understand the different experiences that you might have faced throughout your life, just to make sure that we're not going to trigger you with any foster care experiences. Your foster care agency will also complete some paperwork that might be specific to their organisation as well. So for example, if you have a pool, some agencies will do an additional check on that pool, and other home and environment safety checks as well. Once you complete all of that paperwork, then the assessment starts. So you'll have a qualified assessor come out to your home. They'll chat to everybody who lives in the house, so whether you're a couple or single, with children or without, if you've got housemates or if there are other adults living in the home, your assessor will come out and have a chat to them about a range of different things, starting with how you work with others, your communication style, what sorts of things you do when you're stressed out to make sure that your coping strategies are appropriate for when you're caring for a child or young person. They'll also talk to you about your understanding of childhood development and the needs of children in foster care, as well as some components of things like cultural safety, particularly for First Nations children, making sure that they're kept as connected to family and community as possible, and also explore any sort of areas in your life that might come up as a risk as well for children and young people in your care. So once that assessment is completed, it goes to a panel and a group of people makes a decision about your accreditation, and finally you'll be registered as a foster carer, and usually our foster carers get a call pretty quickly after that to take on their first foster care placement or to welcome a child into their home for the first time. So that process to becoming accredited as a foster carer takes between 3 and 9 months. We usually say to aim for about 6 months. So it's not as though when you call us and make that first step, you're really committing today. There's lots of opportunities for you to learn more and to make sure that you are making the right decision for yourself and your family, making sure that you fully understand the commitment of foster caring, and also to make sure that you understand the supports that are available to you as well. So we talk about it taking a village to raise a child, but of course you're not alone in foster caring either. So your village might look a little bit different to traditional parenting. It includes things like your agency, the department, caseworkers, other foster carers that you might meet, as well as your own family and friends and people around you as well. So they'll talk to you a lot about that village in foster caring. If anybody has any particular questions about foster caring or what's involved, please feel free to pop them in the chat as a comment, in the comment bar below, and I'll respond to those as I can. But we might move forward a little bit into some of the key sort of frequently asked questions that I'm usually asked. So I've mentioned previously that you can be a foster carer if you work outside the home, or if you're a stay-at-home parent or caregiver, you can become a foster carer. So all that's required in those circumstances is to make sure that you've got some degree of flexibility in that work. So just the same as any parent would, that ability to be able to pick up a sick child from school, or to attend medical appointments, or other appointments pertaining to the child, and they'll have a chat to you about what that looks like. So for some people who work a fairly full-on job, for example, but they have their weekends off, then maybe respite care would be a more suitable care arrangement for that family. But you can certainly become a foster carer whether you're working or not working, or your circumstances are somewhere in between. You can be a foster carer if you're married, single, or in a de facto relationship, and whether or not you have experience raising your own children or not as well, you can become a foster carer. So some people think, I've never had children, or my own children have grown and it's been a long time since I've been involved in raising little ones. That is okay. Your foster care agency will talk to you about some of the strategies and parenting tools that we use with children who have experienced trauma, and also remembering that these children might not have the same attachment to you that they might have with their parents. And so they'll talk to you about different ways to parent that might be different to what you've done in the past, or if you've never been a parent yourself as well, they'll talk to you about some of those tools and techniques to use as well. We need foster carers from a wide variety of backgrounds to support children and young people in out-of-home care, now more than ever. And that, of course, does include members of the LGBTIQ plus community as well. So if you're in a same-sex couple or marriage, whether you've got children or you don't, you are absolutely eligible to become a foster carer. Some people ask, I don't own my own home, is that going to be a challenge? Absolutely not. You can become a foster carer whether you rent or own your own home. You don't need to have a huge house with all the latest gaming consoles and things like that. All you need to have is a spare bedroom where a child can have their own privacy, so it obviously needs to have a door. But outside of that, a spare bedroom with a bed and maybe a chest of drawers or something like that, that's the basic requirement. So it doesn't matter if you live in a unit or in a huge house in the country, you're eligible to become a foster carer. In some cases, children in foster care can share rooms, but this is, again, just on a case-by-case basis. And of course, for really little babies, that baby's cot could go into a caregiver's bedroom, or there are other opportunities there. So again, it's just about having that conversation about what your circumstances are, and your agency will talk to you about what the most appropriate foster care arrangement will be in those circumstances. It doesn't look like we're having any comments coming through the chat, so I will keep going with some of the frequently asked questions, but of course please pop them in the chat if you do have any. Some people say that, I'm not sure if I could be a foster carer because I can't commit to years at a time. Really important to remember that foster care and adoption are not the same thing. So foster care is always supposed to be temporary, the temporary care of children and young people. So you don't have to commit to foster caring well and truly into the future. So a lot of people will call up, they might be younger people who are still in the early stages of their career and not sure what's going to happen next, and that's okay. So we will have a chat to you about, again, what that's going to look like long term for you. And of course, if you do become a foster carer in Victoria, over time, your circumstances change or things like that, then you can always change your accreditation or the type of care that you'd like to provide down the track. So plenty of people might do long-term care for a long time and say a child goes into VCE or there's a health concern in the household, they might take a break from foster caring, or they might change the type of care that they provide. So they might say just respite for a while where it's a bit more planned, and that's okay as well. In terms of the actual logistics of foster care, we often get asked some sort of nitty-gritty questions about what the foster care placements involve and that sort of thing. So again, it is a case-by-case basis, and it's really important to remember that in foster caring, having those conversations with your agency is really important, because each child's situation will be unique, and what they require from foster carers will be unique because of that. So people often ask, what sort of information will I get about a child before they come into my care? And the answer to that question is, it depends. So you can always ask for more information, and the way that works is your foster care agency will give you a call and say, they will say, can you take little Timmy? He's 6 years old. We're not quite sure how long the placement will be, but could you have him for a couple of nights to get started? And you can always ask things like what their medical needs are, if there's any information about their routine or behavioural needs, their history in foster care, if they've been in care before, and the reason for the placement now. So you can ask lots of questions like that, and that gives your agency a chance to go back to the department and ask those questions. You'll also be told about things like contact arrangements, so how often they're going to see their parents or other family members, and if they're from a different cultural background to yours, or if they're a First Nations child, then you'll be provided with information about how to best support them culturally and keep them culturally safe. A question's just come through in the chat. It says, what if you have pets and two questions there. Alright, so what if you have pets? You can absolutely have pets and be a foster carer. Most of our foster carers do. So the only requirement in terms of, your accreditation as a foster carer is there needs to be a way that you can separate the animal from the child if you needed to. So sometimes pets can trigger a response in children that we might not have expected, because pets are quite sensory. They smell a certain way, they sound a certain way, and their fur feels a certain way, and we don't know exactly what's happened to all children in foster care. So if there is an issue between the animal and the child, there's just a requirement that you'd be able to separate them if required, but usually that's only for a night or two, depending on the circumstances. So if you've got a laundry where you could close the door or things like that, then that's usually sufficient. But most children in foster care find pets to be quite comforting and reassuring, and they enjoy having something to play with in the home as well. So you can absolutely be a foster carer if you have pets. Of course, if you do have any dangerous animals in the home, that will be part of your home and environment check as well. So obviously if you've got exotic snakes or things like that, they'll do some checks to make sure that they are, safe and secure. But your standard pets, dogs, cats, rabbits, things like that, that can be a really great addition to a child's therapeutic environment. That I'm saying that you can work, but what if it's different shifts early in the morning and afternoons with children? It really does depend on your personal circumstances. If, for example, you were working a lot of early mornings and you weren't able to be there for that morning routine, then they might have a chat to you about for example, the age of children or young people. So obviously adolescents can be a bit more independent, can get themselves up, make breakfast and get themselves off to school. If it's changing all of the time, then respite care might be a more appropriate option for you, because you can always plan those placements. You know in advance when you're going to have a child or young person coming to stay with you and things like that. Or they would look at other people that are in your support network that might be able to help out as well. So if you've got, oftentimes people will say, I work in the mornings, but my mum comes and picks my kids up for school, would that be okay? And that sort of thing works really well if you've already got that built-in support network. Finally, if you're working shift work, there does need to, again, as I said, be that expectation that if you needed to leave work or things like that, then you would be able to do that to help with a sick child or doctor's appointments or things like that. But again, it's really case by case, and it would depend on the agency and the type of care you are looking at. And finally, there are lots and lots of different supports available. So some agencies have built-in support workers that can come into your home and help with, those early mornings or things like that, if that's a requirement. But again, it will come back to that assessment process and looking at what your lifestyle looks like and how much you can commit to foster caring. And in some instances, they would restrict that to things like just emergency care or respite care, where it's just a couple of days at a time, so that those shift hours are not going to disrupt the child too much, and make sure that somebody is around to support their emotional needs and their physical needs as well. So I hope that answers the question, Kim. If you have any more questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. It doesn't look like any other questions are coming through at this stage, so I'll keep going with some of the frequently asked questions that we often hear. Choosing, the type of care or the age of children that you care for is a really common one. So going back to that shift work, for example, or different factors in your environment. So some people might be grandparents and they're looking after little ones, or parents themselves, and so they might choose the age range of children relating to the other children in their home, so it keeps everyone safe that way. So, for example, if you have all children under 10, for example, you might choose to keep the foster care placements that you take under 10. It helps to keep the natural order of the house and make sure that your kids feel a part of it as well. And we often do recommend that you care for children younger than your children as well. So we want your kids to feel like they're a part of foster caring and not being taken over, or that somebody else is coming into the home and getting to be big brother or big sister and boss them around. That's certainly not going to be a calm environment for anybody. And your agency will always want to match you with a child who's a good fit for your family. But of course, the more specific you are about the child or young person that's most suited to your family, then it might take longer to find an appropriate placement match. So, for example, if you're saying I can only care for girls between the age of 3 and 4, then it might take a little bit longer before the right match pops up, and there's a need for foster care for that specific of a child. In some instances, your agency might call you up and say, I know your preference was for primary school age children, but we've got a 4-year-old who's in kinder who needs care, and we think it would be a good fit. So sometimes they will go outside of your preferences, and you can always say no. So as long as you're open and honest about when you can and cannot take on a placement into your home, then that's absolutely fine. So as I mentioned before, many foster carers will take breaks and return to caring once they're ready. So if you experience a loss or a lifestyle change, if you're just tired and want to have a break, plenty of our carers during COVID were going through their own stresses at home, and it wasn't the right time for them as well. And if a particular child comes into care that you don't think will be a good fit for your family. So as I said, if you've signed up for primary school age kids and your agency calls you and says, can you take a 4-year-old? You're always able to say no. And we would encourage carers to really think about what they can and can't provide, where their own capacity is, and just be honest and open with your agency about that. That's the most important thing. People often ask about contact with family, and it's really important to note that, again, the goal of foster care is temporary care of children and young people until they're able to return to their families of origin or another safe and stable environment for permanency. So the contact plans for a child or young person are based on the case plans from the Children's Court. And the child or young person's safety is always the priority. So that means that each case will be assessed individually. The majority of children and young people in care will have some form of contact with their family, and that looks different for every child. So for a lot of children, that might be weekly, fortnightly or monthly contact with mum or dad or grandparents or an auntie or uncle who's quite involved in their life. For some children, it might involve virtual contact, so texting or phone calls or video calls. In some instances it may be supervised, and in others it may be unsupervised. So it just depends on the personal circumstances of the child or young person in your care. Most children in foster care enjoy seeing their families and see family contact as a really important way to keep them in touch with their culture and community. Obviously, depending on their age, they might see that differently. But children in foster care get a lot of benefit out of positive relationships between their foster carers and their birth families. So it's really important that even if you aren't involved, and many foster carers are not involved in the actual face-to-face contact, but it's really important that our foster carers are speaking positively about the child's family, encouraging them to have a good time with on their visits with mum or dad, and also making sure that they feel safe and comfortable. So preparing the child before contact with things like preparing food for them to take and helping them get packed up ready to go, and also speaking about it afterwards, so talking about family contact and making sure that it's a positive experience as well. Another question's just come through from Kim again. It says, if you have a working with children check and police check as required for work, how long is the process? And do you get... Okay, the two questions again. So the first question, if you have a working with children check and police check already, how long is the process? The process will take the same amount of time. Those are just a very small part of the full accreditation process. If you have a Working with Children check already, all you need to do is add on your agency as a voluntary provider, and they will walk you through that process. So it's really simple. You just log in online to your Working with Children check account and add on a new voluntary provider. It is a voluntary check for foster carers, and the police check, you will need to do a new police check as part of your foster care application. Really important that those are done in-house by the foster care agencies, but there's no cost to you to do that. So all you need to do is go in and fill in your details, and that will get sent off directly to the agency. So you do still need to provide those. So again, the process takes between 3 and 9 months. We say between 3 and 9 months because it really does depend on how quickly you as the applicant are getting back to the agency, how engaged you are with each step. If you're someone who works, a lot of hours and you're finding it hard to make those appointments, then that's going to make things a little bit harder as well. But it just depends on everyone's personal circumstances. It can certainly be done within 3 months. The next question was, do you get information on children's background as well as their medication needs? It really does depend. So as I said before, as much information as can be provided to you as a foster carer will be. So if there is a medical need like allergies or specific medication that a child might be taking, or if there is a disability that's known about the child, then the foster carer will know that information. Obviously, in some circumstances, though, children are removed from unsafe situations and there might not be known a lot of information about that child, but wherever possible, they would give that information to you. And in terms of the information about the child's background, you will know if the child is from a different cultural background. The foster care agency will try to discuss will try to find out, the people within that child's family that they might be connected to and things like that, and you will find out that information. But it does depend on the circumstances with that particular child. So I hope that answers the question. Most of these questions really come down to having that open and honest conversation with your agency and letting them know what you would need to feel comfortable as well. So if there is certain information that you would need to know before you take on a placement, if you let your agency know that, then they can be more prepared when they call you for that first time as well. As foster carers, though, there is a lot of information that you might want or that you feel would help you in your caring responsibilities that sometimes just is not available. And so that can happen particularly if there is a major incident leading to a child coming into care or things like that, where there might not be a lot of cooperation from the parents or things. In those instances, it's about you helping the agency to gather that information as well. So as the child tells you things about their life, or as you learn more from, those conversations that you're having with the department and with your agency caseworker as well, then that will build on that body of knowledge as well. It also depends on the type of care. So if you're looking at respite care, that child is in foster care already with a main foster carer through the week. So you'd have a lot more information about things like their routine, their likes, their dislikes, any medical needs that they might have, any challenges that they might have in terms of behaviour or things like that. And those sorts of things will be shared with the respite carer. So of course, if a child's been with a foster carer for a couple of months before respite starts, then there's going to be a lot more information before that respite placement. So if you're someone who needs a lot of information before you can say yes, then respite care might be more suitable for you. Even if that's just where you'd like to get started, lots of people will say, we'll do respite care to get started and to build our experience, and from there we might go into long-term care or we may not. Does anybody have any other questions? I might cover off a couple more frequently asked questions, and then if nobody else has any questions for the chat, then we might finish this one up early. People will often ask, going back to that Working with Children's check and police check, people will often ask, if I have a police record, am I still eligible to foster? As I mentioned, all foster carers need to undertake a police and working with children check as part of the accreditation process, and that's because agencies are required to ensure the safety and well-being of children and young people in their care. Of course, there are some offences like sexual or physical abuse, particularly if they involve a child, that would rule you out from becoming a foster carer, while other offences might not. So if you've got, driving offences or things like that, and especially if they were a long time ago within your own personal history, then that would be discussed with you as part of your accreditation process. And it's really just about being upfront and honest. I hear from people on our inquiry line, saying this is what's happened and what will show up on my police check. Can I still be a foster carer? And providing that information and being open and honest up front is really beneficial, because we don't want to waste your time, and we also don't want any surprises. So if you have a criminal history, even if it was a long time ago, even if you're not sure if it will show up on the police check, just discuss that with your agency up front. If they're minor historic issues, as I said, they probably won't impact on your ability to be a carer. So please discuss those occurrences with your agency up front. And also, people have experienced adversity throughout their lives. And so, depending on the circumstances around what's happened, that will be a part of your assessment process in terms of your life history, and the things that you've experienced as well. And it can help to demonstrate empathy and to understand the circumstances around why children might have come into care in the first place. So please don't think it rules you out immediately. It's just a discussion, and of course, if they are minor offences, then having that chat with your agency. People often ask about financial reimbursement for foster care. So as I mentioned earlier around the Working with Children check, foster carers are volunteers. They are community members that are putting their hand up to help out of opening their hearts and homes. But there is a care allowance for foster carers. So it's not a payment per se. It's intended to contribute to the range of day-to-day expenses incurred when you do provide care for a child or young person. So it includes things like food, clothing, personal items, transport, pocket money, entertainment, those sorts of costs that are incurred with just any child or young person in your care. But it is not an income, so it is tax-free. It's provided by the Department of Families, Fairness and Housing, and they start at just over $400 a fortnight. So there are different payment rates depending on different circumstances, and that payment rate is paid pro rata to emergency and respite carers. So if you have a child for a couple of nights, then you are still entitled to that care allowance, but it does depend on the age of the child and the complexity of their needs as well. That sounds complicated and hard to calculate, but your agency will provide guidance and extra support when it comes to understanding the care allowance. And if you are interested in finding out more about that, you can also read up on the care allowance on the Departments of Families, Fairness and Housing website as well, to get an idea about what that might look like based on the types of care that you're looking to provide. Going back to things like if you work shift work, or if you need extra support for things like daily routines, things like school pickup or childcare, carers are usually responsible for the foster child's daily activities. So if the child's going to and from school, then things like transport would be the carer's responsibility. But as I've said a couple of times now, you are not alone, and it does take a village to raise children. So if there's emergencies or the unexpected pops up, your agency will be very active in offering extra support. So as I said earlier, older children or teenagers might be a little bit more independent, but and be able to work out things like public transport or walk to school unaccompanied. But your agency can also help with providing things like transport in the mornings to and from school if that's required. They also may have specific childcare arrangements available to you. So it does depend on the needs of the child, and we do prefer that children in foster care are not put into childcare 5 days a week. But in saying that, depending on what your household structure is like and your day-to-day activities, then childcare can be arranged. So carers are eligible for the childcare rebate, and some might be eligible for the childcare benefit. And if you've applied for any of the rebates that you're eligible for, the department will also cover the gap for any additional childcare costs. So your agency will talk to you more about that when you are talking about your first placements or ongoing placements. And you can always ask. So if you get a call again about little Timmy who's 4, you can ask if there are childcare arrangements and let the agency know what you would need to make that foster care placement work. People often ask about different disabilities, either for themselves or for children. Having a disability would not disqualify you from becoming a foster carer and does not disqualify you, but the agency will ask you to provide additional information about that. So one of the forms you need to complete throughout your assessment process is a health check, where your doctor will sign off on your mental and physical health. You do not have to disclose details of all of the things in your medical history or things like that, and it's certainly not a medical checkup, but it's just to make sure that your doctor doesn't think that there are any factors that might impede on your ability to provide care. If you're honest and open with your agency about determining your capacity to support children and young people, then you can become a foster carer if you have a disability. In some cases, if that disability would impact on your ability to provide care, they may place some limits around your accreditation. So, for example, if you've got mobility issues, they might ask that you care for older children who are able to sort of bathe themselves and get themselves to and from school and things like that. So it would depend case by case. Oftentimes children in foster care might have intellectual or physical disabilities as well, and it's really important that you're open and honest about what it is that you are comfortable caring for and where your skills and capacity are. And if there are additional needs for any children or young people in foster care, your agency will talk to you about how to support that, and they will also help you with things like accessing OT, tutoring, physical therapy, or other activities like that relating to the child's needs. So you're certainly not alone in that if you do need, if the child does have additional needs as well. If you've got specific skills or a background in medicine or nursing, particularly paediatric care, then you might be eligible to provide a more specialised form of foster care, in which case, as I mentioned about those carer payments earlier, the complexity of the child, the complexity of the child's needs or things like that will be taken into account, but also there are different programs and things that can help to provide that more specialised care for children and young people. It doesn't look like we're having any more questions coming into the chat, and I'm noticing that a couple of people are starting to drop away, so we might start to wrap things up. I would urge you, if you are thinking about foster caring, even if now is not the right time for you, please feel free to give us a call on 1-800-013-088. It's highly likely it'll be me that picks up the phone when you call through, and we can have a chat about your personal circumstances, and I can answer any questions relating to your situation and get you started. Any single person can make a really profound impact on a child's life, and it's really important that we're all playing a part in our community and making sure that we are looking after the community's most vulnerable kids. Victoria does need more foster carers now than ever. Obviously, we're still feeling the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, but if you've ever thought about foster caring, even if now is even if you're not quite ready yet, that is okay. Just give us a call or visit the website, and hopefully we can help you get the information that you need to get started. As I mentioned, that phone number is behind me there. It's 1-800-013-088, and our website is also in the comments below as well, so that's fosteringconnections.com.au. Thank you all for joining us today. I hope I've answered your questions, but if not, please feel free to give us a call. Thank you.